When The Velvet Underground and Nico hit the shelves in 1967, hardly anyone noticed. Despite Andy Warhol's iconic banana artwork, the album sold only about 30,000 copies in its first 5 years, a commercial flop by any standard. But beneath its rough edges and taboo themes lay a raw honesty that would slowly ignite a revolution. Years later, musicians and critics began to recognize the album's wild influence, especially on punk, alternative, and indie music. Rolling Stone eventually called it one of the greatest albums ever, acknowledging its bold spirit and lasting legacy. The album's candid takes on addiction, desire, and urban life were unlike anything heard before. Today, its songs echo in the work of countless artists, and that once overlooked banana is a badge of underground cool. Nick Drake's Pink Moon slipped quietly into the world in 1972, barely making a ripple, with sales figures so low they seemed almost like a rounding error. The album's delicate acoustic guitar and Drake's gentle, haunting voice went largely unnoticed by listeners and critics alike. But over the years, the music found new life. Its minimalist beauty began to attract a devoted audience. After Drake's tragic death, Pink Moon transformed into a beacon for musicians seeking emotional authenticity. Artists like Norah Jones and Bon Iver have since cited Drake as a guiding light. The album's resurgence was helped by its use in a 1999 Volkswagen commercial, introducing his music to a new generation. Now, Pink Moon is cherished as a masterpiece of introspective folk, its quiet magic undimmed by time. Big Star's debut, #1 record, is the musical equivalent of a hidden treasure chest, critically praised when it came out, but barely selling any copies. Radio play was scarce, partly because of distribution disasters, and the band faded into obscurity. Yet a few years down the road, musicians in the burgeoning power pop and indie rock scenes started to sing its praises. Songs like 13 and In the Street, the latter later becoming the theme to That 70s Show, became underground anthems. Bands such as REM and The Replacements openly credited Big Star as a major influence. Today, #1 record is seen as a cornerstone of the power pop genre, its jangly guitars and aching vocals inspiring new bands year after year. When the Zombies released Odyssey and Oracle, almost nobody cared. The album flopped in both the US and the UK, and the band broke up before its only hit single, Time of the Season, finally gained traction. But the lush harmonies and psychedelic pop songwriting slowly earned the album a cult following. Years later, critics and musicians began to call it a masterpiece, often placing it among the greatest albums ever made. The intricate arrangements and inventive use of studio effects set a new standard for psychedelic pop. Bands like the Beach Boys and Radiohead have cited it as a source of inspiration. Today, Odyssey and Oracle is revered for its imaginative spirit and enduring beauty. Forever Changes by Love was met with confusion and indifference upon its release, overshadowed by the year's bigger, splashier rock albums. Its blend of psychedelic folk, orchestral flourishes, and cryptic lyrics made it a tough sell for mainstream listeners. Over time, however, the album's intricate craftsmanship and emotional depth caught the attention of critics and musicians. The Smiths' Johnny Marr and Beck have both spoken of its influence on their own work. Its themes of existential anxiety and fleeting romance feel as relevant now as they did in the 1960s. Today, Forever Changes is regularly listed among the best albums of all time, its legacy secure as a touchstone for adventurous music lovers. Spirit of Eden confused fans who expected another round of synthpop hits from Talk Talk. Instead, they delivered a mysterious, atmospheric masterpiece that veered into uncharted territory. The record's experimental mix of jazz, ambient, and rock left many listeners cold at first, and sales were poor. But as the years passed, musicians and critics started to realize just how groundbreaking the album was. Its use of silence and space paved the way for the post-rock movement, influencing bands like Radiohead and Sigur Rós. Spirit of Eden is now considered a classic, celebrated for its emotional depth and fearless creativity. When television released Marquee Moon, the album barely made a dent on the charts. But beneath the surface, its intricate guitar interplay and poetic lyrics were quietly rewriting the rules of rock. The title track, with its epic solos and hypnotic groove, became a secret handshake for musicians in the know. Over the years, bands like The Strokes, Interpol, and many others have cited television as a key influence. Critics eventually caught up, and Marquee Moon is now celebrated as a defining document of punk and indie rock. Its legacy is a testament to the power of subtle innovation. The Dreaming was Kate Bush's leap into the unknown. an album so experimental it left many fans bewildered and critics divided. The album's unconventional production, odd rhythms, and theatrical vocals made it a commercial disappointment at first. But Bush was undeterred, pouring her imagination into songs that tackled everything from Irish history to psychological horror. Over time, the boldness of The Dreaming earned it a cult following, especially among artists who admired Bush's fearlessness. Today, the album is hailed as a visionary work that helped open doors for women in pop and rock, its influence echoing in the music of Bjork, Florence Welch, and St. Vincent. When Liz Phair released Exile in Guyville, it didn't set the charts on fire, but it quietly became a rallying cry for women in rock. With raw, honest lyrics about relationships, sex, and independence, Phair spoke directly to listeners who felt left out by the mainstream. Critics praised her fearless storytelling, and the album was later included in many Best of the Decade lists. Over time, Exile in Guyville inspired a generation of female songwriters, from Fiona Apple to Alanis Morissette. Its lo-fi sound and confessional style have made it a lasting favorite among indie rock fans, its reputation only growing with each passing year. Neutral Milk Hotels in the Aeroplane Over the Sea was barely noticed when it came out, with little radio play and no chart success. But something about its surreal lyrics and fuzzy, lo-fi sound started to resonate with a small but passionate group of fans. The album's emotional intensity and oddball imagery made it an underground sensation, passed from friend to friend like a secret. Over the years, its legend grew, and songs like Holland, 1945, and Two-Headed Boy became cult anthems. Today, the album is considered one of indie rock's defining works, inspiring countless artists and listeners alike. At first, the Stone Roses album didn't make much of a splash. It took months for the band's shimmering blend of psychedelic pop and dance rhythms to catch on in the UK. But as word spread, the album became the beating heart of the Manchester scene, influencing bands like Oasis and the Charlatans. Its anthems, such as I Wanna Be Adored and She Bangs the Drums, helped shape the sound of British rock in the 90s. The slow-burning success of the Stone Roses proved that sometimes greatness just needs a little time to bloom. When Jeff Buckley released Grace, it was met with modest sales and only mild critical attention. It wasn't until after Buckley's untimely death that the album began to gain the recognition it deserved. Buckley's soaring vocals and deeply emotional delivery on songs like Hallelujah and Last Goodbye struck a chord with listeners. Over the years, Grace has been hailed as one of the greatest vocal albums of the 1990s, praised by artists including Radiohead's Thom Yorke and U2's Bono. Its influence can be heard in the work of countless singer-songwriters who followed. Slint's Spiderland landed with barely a whisper, selling only a few thousand copies and receiving almost no press. Yet its haunting, angular guitar work and spoken word vocals quietly inspired a new genre. Years after its release, musicians began to cite Spiderland as the birth of post-rock, influencing bands like Mogwai and Godspeed You, Black Emperor. The album's stark atmosphere and unpredictable dynamics have given it a mythical status among fans. Today, Spiderland is seen as an essential listen for anyone interested in the evolution of experimental rock. Vashti Bunyan's debut album sank without a trace when it was released in 1970, with only a few hundred copies ever sold. Disheartened, Bunyan left the music industry entirely. Decades later, though, the album was rediscovered by a new wave of freak folk artists and fans. Its gentle, pastoral songs and Bunyan's soft, whispery voice became a touchstone for acts like Devendra Banhart and Joanna Newsom. Bunyan's story is a testament to the idea that sometimes, the world just isn't ready for something beautiful, until it is. This self-titled album from the United States of America was a commercial and critical oddity, blending avant-garde electronics with psychedelic rock. At the time, few listeners connected with its experimental sound, and the band quickly faded into obscurity. However, over the years, the album's daring approach won it a cult following among fans of experimental music. Its influence can be seen in the work of later artists who pushed the boundaries of rock and electronic music. Today, it stands as a fascinating relic of 1960s musical innovation. Tago Mago by Can was too wild and strange for most listeners in 1971, and the album barely sold. Its sprawling jams and hypnotic rhythms were far ahead of their time, laying the groundwork for what would become krautrock. As interest in experimental music grew, so did appreciation for Can's fearless creativity. Bands from Radiohead to LCD Soundsystem have acknowledged the album's influence. Tago Mago is now hailed as a groundbreaking record that dared to reimagine what rock could be. When Loveless first emerged, critics loved it but sales were disappointing. Its swirling guitars and dreamy vocals created a disorienting sound that baffled some and entranced others. Over time, the album became the gold standard for the shoegaze genre, inspiring bands like Slowdive, Ride, and even Smashing Pumpkins. The album's reputation has only grown with each passing year, and today it's often cited as one of the most influential records of the 1990s. Its sound remains as mysterious and compelling as ever. Trout Mask Replica is often called one of the strangest albums ever made. When it was released, most people didn't know what to make of its chaotic blend of blues, free jazz, and surreal poetry. It sold poorly but became a badge of honor for music aficionados. Over the decades, its reputation grew, with artists like Tom Waits and PJ Harvey calling it a masterpiece of avant-garde genius. Trout Mask Replica is now revered for its uncompromising originality, influencing a wide swath of alternative musicians. The Modern Lovers recorded their debut in the early 1970s, but the album didn't see the light of day until years later. When it finally surfaced, it didn't make much of a commercial impact, yet its proto-punk sound and raw honesty quickly found a home among underground music fans. Jonathan Richman's lyrics about awkward love and urban life made the album a touchstone for punk and indie artists, including the Sex Pistols and Talking Heads. Today, it's regarded as an essential link between the 60s garage rock and 70s punk movements. When Suicide's debut album appeared in 1977, it was just too much for the mainstream, too noisy, too confrontational, too ahead of its time. Audiences often booed the band off stage, and critics were baffled. But as punk and electronic music evolved, the album's raw synths and harsh vocals began to attract a cult following. Acts like Depeche Mode, Bruce Springsteen, and Nine Inch Nails have all acknowledged Suicide's influence. The album is now viewed as a bold blueprint for much of what followed in electronic and punk music.